it's arguable that mental health is more of a challenge for athletes and coaches than ever before. So with Jim, with that in mind, I'd like to start off by asking you, how would you define mental health?
Well, thanks, Bill. Thanks, Lindsay. Thanks for everyone for joining us today. It's such an important topic, as we all know, and we all want to get a good handle on mental health because it is such an important topic. So I really like this definition. We could read it together from the World Health Organization, which is their definition of mental health is, I think, a really good one. Mental health is a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. And from a subjective standpoint, I would say that mental health is when you really feel like your true and best self. And as the brilliant psychologist Abraham Maslow said, in any given moment, we have two options: to step forward into growth or to step back into safety. And mental health is all about continuing to step forward into growth. And that's what the Champion's Mind is all about, which is thinking gold and never settling for silver. And thinking gold is really about learning and improving and being the very best we can be, even though sometimes it's, more of our human nature to want to step back into safety and comfort. And so we have to push ourselves to be our best self and learn skills and strategies to make that happen.
Oh, that's great stuff, Jim. Thank you. And could you tell us a bit more about how mental health can impact well-being and performance?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was at Arizona State University for 10 years and served as both sports psychologist and licensed professional counselor. So I know from firsthand experience how tightly mental health and athletic performance, as well as academic performance, are all intertwined. And I often say there's no health without mental health, and there's definitely not peak performance without mental health. So, if we're overly anxious, worried, or depressed, that's not something we can just set aside when we feel like it. It impacts our relationships with family, friends, coaches, and teammates, and has a detrimental effect on how we practice and limits our performance, obviously, in competition. And so how we feel directly affects how we act. And this means that, negative emotions often spill over into our behavior and our performance. And while mental health issues can feel very personal, they do have knock-on effects on the people around us. We might have outbursts of anger, be almost paralyzed by melancholy, or withdraw from other people. We can become irritable, irrational, and more angry than usual. Or as we begin to pull inward, we ignore the needs of others and, just become solely focused on our own issues and stop communicating effectively. And this makes things tougher on those in our inner circle. And mental health can also have physical consequences like becoming sedentary, sleeping poorly, or gaining weight because of our attempts to self-soothe by eating or drinking too much. And when we're chronically stressed, our heart rate goes up, levels of stress hormones like cortisol skyrocket, we take slow, rapid breaths, and our muscles can tighten up and our joints can get sore. So among the athletes I work with, I often notice something different about the ones who are injured, not because they have a cast on an arm or a brace on a leg, but that their shoulders are slumped, they have a frown on their face, and they look at the ground a lot. And so their body language, looks defeated. And it's often the same with somebody who's anxious, worried, or depressed, dealing with mental health issues. They look defeated, and we could see that in terms of their body language. And it's not just relationships or your sports performance that starts to suffer. If you work, your job performance might slip, or if you're a student, as we mentioned earlier, your grades might start dropping. And when left unaddressed, mental health issues can start to dominate your entire life. And that's why this topic is so important.
Well, thank you, Jim. That's very helpful. And what impact would you say mental health challenges can have on an athlete's mindset and the expression of their mental skills?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, Phil. So as you know, we've included mental health in the Champions Mind course because you can't separate it from the other aspects of mental skills work. And just like visualization or goal setting, we could learn to use tools and techniques that help improve and safeguard our mental health. We all have a negativity bias as human beings, which is designed to help us detect threats and stay alive. But when our mental health starts to suffer, that negativity bias gets really amplified to the point that almost all of our thoughts can become negative. And, it's almost like we fall into a black hole. And we start to question our ability as an athlete, or as a coach and as a person, am I even a good person? And self-doubt begins to overtake self-confidence. And that's not a good feeling, as we all know. So as our worries escalate, we tend to ruminate on them more and more, which prevents us from being fully present and giving our very best in the moment. So rather than visualizing success, we expect failure and calamity. And unfortunately, this could become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Cognitive distortions are another module on the app, and that pertains to both peak performance and mental health. And specifically, cognitive distortions are thinking errors that all of us make from time to time, and become more common and more severe when our mental health slips. And instead of moving on from, let's say, a drop catch or a missed shot during a game, we tend to fixate and obsess on it. Or if we have a bad day, we tend to think that we're going to have a bad week and then a bad month. And rather than celebrating our small successes and wins, we minimize them while magnifying our mistakes. And then, as I mentioned, just dwelling on our mistakes and, kind of pitching a 10 in there and living in our mistakes as if we are a mistake. And then we start to view every situation in sport and life through an overly emotional lens and catastrophize even the smallest issues into a gigantic problem. And that's where sometimes, a small ditch can feel like it's the Grand Canyon. So as an athlete who's struggling with their mental health, or just any of us that, might be struggling with mental health issues, we no longer act like the fearsome predator, that we want to be in competition, where we're confident, determined, and even ruthless, while displaying good sportsmanship, of course. And instead, we can become like a prey animal that's overly vigilant, jumpy, and nervous. And this leads to you tightening up and becoming risk adverse at the very time when your best performance requires you to be loose and free and to take chances. And again, so as I mentioned before, we step back into safety. We start avoiding things. We start playing small. We stop taking, smart chances and risks, and stepping forward into growth. So that's what it's all about, is we want to keep stepping forward into growth.
Oh, great stuff, Jim. Thank you. And what would you say the four main areas of mental health are? And could you tell us a little bit about each?
Absolutely. So the first component of mental health is stress, anxiety, and worry. And as we discussed in a recent webinar, we need a little bit of pressure. We need a little bit of stress. A little bit of worry is okay, so that we can rise to the occasion and perform our best. And, perhaps that's between 1 and 4, let's say on a scale of 1 to 10. We have a little bit there, but it's manageable. But it gives us that, sharpens our senses a little bit, gives us a little juice and energy. But if that starts to go higher than, 4, 5, 6, 7, up that scale of stress, then, our worries, our anxiety, just how we feel, can really, that could really go through the roof. And when that happens, we start to ignore the good wolf in us, and feed our bad wolf, and letting our self-talk turn really negative and allowing it to continue cycling round and round. Physically, we move into a sympathetic stress state in which we're hyper vigilant all the time, and might even start to become a little paranoid. We find it hard to relax and calm down. And, it's difficulty, we experience difficulty falling and staying asleep at night, and that can become a bigger and bigger issue. And then rather than looking at situations as they really are, we begin to expect the worst. And, we get pretty pessimistic, and we get caught up in regretting what has happened, and then especially fearing what's about to happen. So we're never really truly in the moment. We're never where our feet are. And so if anxiety, worry, and stress really spiral out of control, again, we just return to that. I just want to be safe. I just want to be in my comfort zone. I want to avoid challenges. And that doesn't get us very far. The second main component of mental health is depression. And of course, we're going to all feel blue and sad and down and depressed at times because, we care about life and we want it to be as good as possible. But, and especially right now, everyone's having a rough go of it with COVID-19. And I would say that, that's been something that, life can be hard enough as it is. But then with COVID-19 and everything that's happened, it's a double challenge. But when we're really depressed, we experience feelings of helplessness, powerlessness, and worthlessness. And we begin to convince ourselves that we can't pull out of this. Nobody cares about us. And the future is hopeless. And it's hard to reason with a depressed person, or hard for someone to reason with us if we're really depressed, because, we tend to discount all the positives in our life and only acknowledge and dwell on real and perceived negatives. So we definitely need to get a handle on that as well. The third area of mental health is substance abuse. And, sometimes this comes to the fore when numbers 1 and 2, the anxiety and the depression, aren't being recognized or remedied. And some people develop eating disorders when their mental health declines, while others turn to alcohol, smoking, and other drugs to try and self-medicate. Unfortunately, as we all know, these self-destructive behaviors lead to further mental, emotional, and physical issues, and so just compound the problem. And then the fourth component of mental health is relationships. And even during COVID, lockdowns, none of us exist apart from other people. How we think, feel, and act impacts our family, friends, coaches, and teammates. And when someone is experiencing mental health issues, their relationships start to deteriorate, friction points become more common, and a lot of damage can be done, whether it's intentional or not. And someone who's struggling with depression, anxiety, and worry can either become combative and unstable, or, on the other hand, shut down and withdraw. And either is tough to deal with for the people who care about them. So we definitely want to make sure that we get a handle on our anxiety. We don't stay in a black hole of, feeling depressed. We are really smart about substance use. And then we do our best to maintain strong relationships with people that are close to us.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Jim. Appreciate that in-depth jumping into those topics. One of the problems probably for coaches listening or for teammates is to maybe suspect something might be wrong with someone that they care about, either in their family, a friend, or again on their team, but not be quite sure. So what are some common red flags that might indicate that somebody we care about is dealing with a mental health issue and may need some help?
Great question, Phil. And, as I just mentioned, if someone starts smoking, taking drugs, drinking much more than usual, obviously that could be an indication there's a problem. The same goes for self-harm. You might notice a change in mood that goes beyond them just being a bit down for a day or two. Perhaps they become more volatile or aggressive, or pull away and don't say anything. Any kind of significant and sustained change in personality and demeanor is a red flag. And it's if someone starts doing something out of character for them. And, sometimes it could even be someone that, an extreme example, someone that seems deliriously happy all of a sudden, that could be a sign that, whoa, what's going on? Are they thinking about, making a decision to really harm themselves? And there's almost a relief that, they're going to be out of pain soon. And so that's important to keep in mind too, that if someone just seems like all of a sudden they don't have a care in the world and they're almost deliriously happy, okay, what's going on here? I might be concerned as well about something like that. From a sports perspective, if one of your players or teammates used to be engaged and highly motivated, but is suddenly passive and distant, that is obviously a warning sign. Or someone who's outgoing and talkative now has nothing to say and, maybe hurries away at the end of practice. Helping them could be as simple as acknowledging the behavior change, even if you think it's something they might not want to hear. Or you could ask simple questions like, hey, how are you feeling? Are you feeling okay? Or maybe, hey, it doesn't seem like you're yourself today. What can I do to help? Can I hang out with you? Can I check in with you later? Is there anything on your mind, that, we could talk about that might be helpful? And then listen actively to their answer. It might not, it's not a one-off event because they might say, no, I'm good. And then it's like, hey, do you mind if I check back with you? And you could always check back with them the next day or two, because then they might be more open to, talking about what they're thinking about and how they're feeling. If it's a self-destructive pattern, you might need a bit more to be a bit more forceful in this behavior, in the behavior that you point out. And it's not a judgment thing. It's just, simple as, hey, here's what I'm noticing. I'm concerned about you. I care about you. And so you can still be compassionate and offering to help.
Sure, thank you. And what about if things seem to have escalated, or you try to help someone, but the issue appears to be more serious than one you can handle? What would be some good next steps there?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly times when a friend, family member, or teammate isn't equipped to deal with a mental health issue. You're not a trained clinician, so you don't have to put that pressure on yourself to be one, or to try to be one. In which case it will help if you could find a specific person to refer them to. And that could be the school counselor, the sports psychologist on campus, or a professional in your community. If you're the one dealing with the mental health challenge, try to think of a go-to person that you could trust to share your struggles with. The key here is never suffer alone. And that go-to person might be a sibling, friend, or coach. And if you don't have such a person, then definitely reach out to a counselor or a psychologist. And this is really important. View this as being brave, not being weak, because it takes courage to acknowledge that you need a helping hand. Everyone goes through something. It's just part of our human condition, and there's times where we all need a helping hand. And so if you think something might be wrong, don't hesitate. Or again, try to be your own clinician or a clinician for someone else. Ask for help if you start feeling stuck or paralyzed, in your painful or harmful thought patterns, feelings, or actions. And I would say that another sign that it might be time to ask for outside help is if people you trust start commenting about your emotional or mental state. Rather than ignoring this, getting defensive or becoming angry, acknowledge that those around you have your best interests at heart. So trust your gut that, something doesn't feel right here. And then trust your friends, that, hey, maybe they're seeing some things that, that I do need to address. And I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and get help because, I want to take the best care of myself that I can.
Well said, Jim. And what would you say are some of the most common sabotaging or self-defeating beliefs that we can struggle with when we're having mental health issues, or that can manifest into mental health issues? And what are some ways to fix those, or some antidotes to some of these beliefs?
While external situations like COVID-19 can certainly trigger feelings of doubt, insecurity, and fear, which can manifest into mental health problems, but all too often it's what's going on inside our heads to interpret our circumstances that's at the real root of the issue. So let's take a look at some of the beliefs that can be sabotaging and self-defeating, along with a remedy for each one. And we can start with perfectionism. A touch of perfectionism can be actually a really good thing, as we all know, when it drives you to set high standards and to constantly improve your game, and look for a bigger game to play. But if it goes too far, you might begin to believe that you can never make a mistake or fail. If you do, and your self-worth is tied only to outcomes, then you can easily get down on yourself or even feel worthless. Antidote is to recognize that nobody is on top of their game every single day. And even the best players in your sport, the best ones of all time, the legends in your sport, have gone through slumps. And right now, during COVID-19, when you probably can't practice or play as you'd like, good has to be good enough right now for all of us. Be kind and compassionate to yourself and more forgiving of lapses. Be patient on your path to mastery. Give yourself permission to be human, and acknowledge that sometimes, even though you try your best, you might not win today, but you can still learn and improve until you eventually find yourself back in the winner's circle. So the next one, in terms of common trap that athletes and all of us fall into, is approval addiction. And this is when you feel like you need everybody to love you and validate your performance, just so that you can feel worthwhile. And when you think like this, you're putting way too much stock in the opinions of others. If they say anything that's not overwhelmingly positive, it can feel like you just got wounded. And so the antidote here is to put your craft, your goals and the hard work you're putting in above any criticism and approval. And, to really try to be where your feet are and focus on giving your best effort in the moment. Recognize that you can't please everyone all the time. It'd be nice if everyone loved us and, approved of us all the time, but that's not going to happen. And you don't need it. What you really need to do is, be able to look yourself in the mirror and feel good about the work that you're putting in, and proud of yourself. So again, the antidote is to put your craft above criticism and approval. And, again, be where your feet are, and focus on giving your best effort in the moment. Okay, another self-sabotaging belief is entitlement. And I unfortunately see that a lot in the sports world, which occurs when you lose perspective on the big picture and start to feel like the world owes you something all the time. And this is tied to a woe is me attitude, whereby you think you don't deserve for things like the pandemic to affect you, or that anything could go wrong, because it's like you take it almost too personal. And so the antidote to this is to really understand the broader context of where we find ourselves in, and even to recognize that your great grandparents lived through a lot worse than we're going through right now. They had both world wars. They had the Spanish flu, the Dust Bowl, and the Great Depression to deal with. And so actively being grateful for all the good things that you have and the people around you is a surefire way to stop feeling entitled, as is doing something to serve your team or community. So it's not dismissing or discounting that you're going through a rough patch and that, things are hard right now. But in the grand scheme of things, we do as a society, and, we're very fortunate to be living in the world that we're living in right now, and we'll get through this together. If you get stuck feeling depressed, you might believe that you'll never feel happy or fulfilled again. Your problems will always be this bad or worse, and there's no hope for your future. If you start feeling like this, try to acknowledge that while things are hard, you've got through tough times before. Have some confidence in yourself. You're much more capable than you could ever imagine. And it's also important, we all know this, but we don't always do a good job with this, of try to spend more time around positive, uplifting people who make you feel good about yourself. And again, look back on a difficult challenge you faced in the past and realize that the same fortitude and resilience that equipped you to deal with that will help you get through whatever you're going through now. Another kind of thinking error that we tend to fall into, and this relates to the anxiety and worry and stress and that we tend to slip into, is magical thinking. And this occurs when we think that if we just worry enough about a situation, things will turn out okay. It's kind of like a superstition. You know, if I worry all the time, it won't happen. And in this thinking pattern, you're worried. You get worried if you're not worried enough, which is kind of ironic. But in reality, worrying won't help. It's kind of, you know, I've heard worry described as a currency. It's just not worth anything. And so you'd be better off directing your energy into remaining positive and proactive and figuring out practical plans to improve your situation. And that really is the definition of mental toughness, is, you know, trying to do your best to stay positive and proactive under the most adverse conditions. And another way that I would say that athletes often sabotage themselves is by letting their frustration tolerance get too low. So that's another kind of self-defeating thought process of low frustration tolerance. And this is related to entitlement. When we're feeling like this, we start to magnify every little problem and make mountains out of molehills. And this turns every day into an uphill battle. The antidote is to recognize that 2 or 3 things could go wrong every day, and even sometimes more. And so reframe so-called problems to avoid as challenges to embrace. Figure out how to hit these curveballs first, and then eventually to knock them over the fence for home runs. And, you know, that's what champions do. There was a famous golfer named Walter Hagen that was, you know, at the turn of, you know, in the early 1900s was, you know, the best golfer in the world for a period of time. And he always just had a great attitude when he played golf, and especially in the major championships. And he was asked, you know, like, how do you have such a great attitude? And he said, well, you know, I expect 2 or 3 things to go wrong every round of golf that I play. And so when they happen, I just think, oh, there's one of the 2 or 3 things that went wrong today. And then I get on with the next shot. So I thought that was a really cool attitude about, you know, not expecting everything to be perfect. It was almost like, you know, I don't have really any expectations. I know I can handle whatever does come up. And then the last self-limiting belief that we'll talk about here briefly is the superhero complex. And this is where you believe that you should be impervious to any emotion that's less than absolute strength and power, as if you were Superman or Wonder Woman. And in reality, life isn't a game of perfect. And none of us are 10 feet tall and bulletproof. And just because you sometimes have a negative thought or an occasional feeling of self-doubt, or even go through a rough patch or, you know, bad stretch on the job or in your performance, or just in general, that doesn't mean that you're weak or a failure. It means you're a human. And it's okay to be vulnerable to others when you feel like this, and you can power up by seeking their support and encouragement.
That's a lot of great information there, Jim. Thank you. And what would you say some coping tools are that athletes can use when they're feeling low?
Well, I look at mental skills as both performance and coping tools, as we've, you know, discussed at the beginning. And, you know, daily mindset training will help you to perform better in your sport, but can also help you to better deal with COVID-19 and the other challenges that life throws your way. The easiest way I know to change your physical and psychological state is your breath. And so let's go ahead and practice that just for a second. I'd like everyone to do a quick exercise with me for a moment. Let's begin by taking a nice deep breath. Okay, so breathe in, let all the air out, even exaggerate the exhale. And then just for the next, let's say 30 seconds, imagine, so we're going to do a little bit of color breathing. Imagine inhaling a calming blue through your nose and exhaling an anxious red. So inhale a calming blue and then exhale an anxious red. All the way in and all the way out. And take your time with this. Again, breathing in the most calming color of blue you can imagine, and then breathing out just an anxious, you know, get the stress, tension, Just let that go. And hopefully you're starting to feel a little bit calmer. And what I love about this breathing technique, color breathing, is you kind of use the right side of your brain. It's, you know, you use your imagination. And so it just feels good. It gets you kind of out of that loop of overthinking and worrying, you know, more on the left side of your brain, and get you into your right side of your brain. Another good breathing technique to practice is ratio breathing. And this is where you breathe in for 4 and you count 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you exhale for 6. And what the prolonged exhalation does is it really improves the relaxation response and makes you feel more relaxed by extending the exhalation. And so for both of these techniques, color breathing or ratio breathing, it's really important to practice these and look for opportunities throughout your day just to, hey, I got an extra minute here. Let's do either color breathing or, you know, ratio breathing, in for 4, out for 6. And it's just a great reset for your mind and your body. Now, so in addition to breathing, which we all know, but again, we could all do better at and play around with these different breathing exercises, we can also act our way out of a stressed out state and into a more of a relaxed state. And the first method is to tell yourself that no matter what happens today, you're going to maintain positive body language. Stand tall, hold your head up high, and walk confidently. Avoid slumping, slouching, and other depressed postures. You could amplify your body language by paying attention to your facial expressions. So avoid looking downcast. Replace your frown with a confident smile. Put a confident smile on your face and make an effort to keep your face neutral at worst, even if a problem or unexpected challenge arises during your day. Sleep is another potent coping tool. You know, we've all noticed that it's easier to keep our emotions on an even keel when we're well rested, and that you feel more up and down when you're tired. So try doing the color breathing exercise or the ratio breathing exercise we just did together for a few minutes when you go to get into bed at night. And then perform the pillow test, which is, you know, ask yourself, you know, did I do everything I could today to be a champion? And that might be, you know, yeah, I scheduled an appointment with, you know, a counselor or psychologist, or yeah, I talked to a friend, you know, kind of about what I was going through today. Or I, you know, I did a really good job with self-care with my breathing exercises and, you know, try to maintain good body language throughout the day. And then I think it's really important to, you know, then think about, okay, how am I going to be a champion tomorrow? Get excited about, you know, love the challenge of the next day, whatever that's going to be. And it's also important to mix a little gratitude into your attitude. So jot down or say out loud 3 things, or mention, you know, three people that you're very thankful for today. And in this way, we could rest easier when we go to bed at night. Then in the morning, start your day by looking into your, you know, bathroom mirror, and as uncomfortable as it might feel at first, look yourself in the eyes and say, I am a champion. And then decide that you're going to go for gold all day and you're not going to settle for silver. And again, the point here is to step into growth rather than stepping back into safety. So, you know, we really want to make each day count. And you can spend a few minutes visualizing success at practice, in the classroom, you know, on the job, or in your next game to get yourself in a confident can-do frame of mind. So I often encourage the athletes I work with to wear a rubber band around their wrist. And if you catch yourself getting stuck in, you know, negative thinking, what you could do is snap the band to remind yourself to get back into thinking gold. And if you find yourself saying something self-defeating like, you know, I'm an idiot, you know, this is awful, you could snap the band again and immediately counter by saying, hey, nice try, you know, to the bad wolf in our head. I'm a champion in the making. And when you do something good, give yourself credit where credit's due. And you could use self-talk to affirm it by saying, hey, that's just like me to do that. When you mess up, hey, that was, you know, that wasn't like me. I'm going to fix it and move on. And then, I'd like to also say that, it's also beneficial if you carve out time every day to do something fun or relaxing just for you. And sometimes we might only have 10 or 15 minutes, but 10 or 15 minutes is better than nothing. And, when we have a little bit more time, it could be reading a new book, watching a movie, or even taking a nice hot bath. And when we're not feeling good about ourselves, when our mental health is kind of beating us up a little bit, we almost feel like we don't deserve to take really good care of ourselves. And that's when it's most important to take really good care of ourselves. Look for opportunities or try new things to feel good about yourself.
Oh, I like that, Jim. Just kind of making sure that we do carve out that time to do something positive for ourselves each day, and that we do deserve it. So that was great. Thank you. When we were talking about this presentation, you shared with me a major difference in how we contextualize or frame our circumstances when our mental health is good versus maybe when we're feeling like it's challenged. So could you talk to me a little bit about the differences between that threat state and the challenge state?
Absolutely. So it could be pressure during a game, or it could be just pressure in life. We only have two options, and one is to look at it as a threat. And again, that's taking a step back into safety. I want to get this over with, or I want to avoid whatever it is at all costs. Or, bring it on, game on, let's go. This is why I've trained so hard, or this is why I've worked so hard on my mental game, is for challenges like this. And so one of the biggest issues athletes and coaches are having during COVID-19 is dealing with all the question marks and unknowns. And while you can't control if your area goes back into lockdown, or if your next game is canceled, or, any of those kind of things, you can choose how to respond to that mentally by being either in a threat state or a challenge state. And so in a threat state, you start acting like a prey animal. And you're always running scared, you're looking over your shoulder, and you're acting tight. You're on your heels, rocking back to avoid the threat, like an antelope scanning long grass for the stalking lion. Whereas in a challenge state, you become that lion. You're a fearless predator who's always trying to find the upper hand in any situation. You're confident in your ability to make the kill, and you are on your toes, ready for anything that comes your way. And champions don't allow themselves to complain or wish the circumstances were different. Or when they start thinking, why me, or why us, or why now? They acknowledge the hardship of the situation, but then they start finding ways to use that to their advantage. For example, if you can't train your body with your teammates right now, use this extra time as an opportunity to train your mental toughness, take care of your mental health, and build your mind into your greatest weapon. And, I've had a lot of athletes that said to me, in the past, I've used, I don't have the time to work on my mental game as an excuse. Now I'm taking away that excuse, and I'm going to make my mindset a weapon, not a weakness. And when you really think about it, as we've discussed in previous webinars, the mind is the athlete, the mind is the performer, and the body is just the vehicle it uses to accomplish its goals. So there's nothing more important to work on than your mental health or your mental game. So when you choose to be in a challenge state, you're setting yourself up not only to get through the pandemic, but to come out the other side stronger and more capable than before. So think about the story you want to tell your kids about how well you handled the pandemic. You don't have to figure everything out today or always have your stuff together. Instead, actively seek out small wins and decide how you're going to win today. So again, when you notice that you're kind of getting in that threat state, it's really important to kind of switch gears into a challenge state. And again, love the challenge could be a good mantra for you, or step into growth. I think those are kind of good phrases that you could use to make the most out of each day. And, one thing I'd like to say in terms about more of a threat state when we're feeling anxious, worried, and stressed is we tend to speed up everything. And so we drive faster, we talk faster, we eat faster. And so my challenge for everyone listening today is notice if and when you're doing that and do the opposite. So drive a little bit under the speed limit, drink your coffee a little bit slower, eat a little bit slower, be more mindful, taste the food. And by slowing down, you actually end up getting back into that challenge state of like, okay, I can handle this. When we speed up, that's when things start spinning out of control. So slow yourself down, and then you'll slow the game, so to speak, down.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jim. And looking at this topic of mental health more from a team perspective, what are some things that any coaches that have joined us here today can do to help their athletes improve mental health as a group?
Yeah, that's a great question, Phil, because I know the coaches who joined us today always have their athletes' best interests at heart. And the first thing that a coach can emphasize to their players is that being in need is not being in trouble. So if you're dealing with, some personal issues, family issues, everything that falls under the umbrella of mental health issues, you're not in trouble. You're in need, and you can get help and overcome this. And coaches could even start to encourage appropriate self-disclosure within the team. Start by being honest, open, and vulnerable about how you're feeling, and just even acknowledging that, hey, this is a struggle, this is a challenge for all of us. But let's stick together. Let's use all the resources that are available to us, and let's try to find a way to come out stronger on the other end. And we will come out stronger on the other end. In addition, I would say that what helps destigmatize mental health and normalize feeling anxious or worried is to remind your players that that you're only human and they're only human too. And you could also share examples of pro athletes like Michael Phelps, Simone Biles, Kevin Love, Dak Prescott, who have recently shared stories about their own mental health struggles. And then you could also reframe just the whole idea of reaching out for help as a strength, not a weakness. So be specific about the resources available at your school, campus, or in your community, and let the team know that if anyone needs professional help, you know who to send them to, and that they'll be in good hands. And if an athlete takes advantage of this, encourage them to stick with it and give the process time. I always tell, whether for sports psychology services or counseling services, I've always told my clients, hey, give this 6 months, give it a chance to work. You wouldn't go lifting weights one day and say, oh, it didn't help me, I'm not going to do that anymore. You'd realize that it's a process. And so finding a good counselor and sticking with it is really important. So again, just like learning a new sporting skill, counseling or therapy takes a while to work. So urge them to commit and be patient with the process. And what I would say with that as well is sometimes, I've had people say, well, I did try to meet with a counselor once and we just didn't seem like a good fit. And my response is, that'd be a shame if you just let one experience like that color, your approach in terms of working with or trying someone new. So sometimes it does take a little work and effort on your part to find the best fit for you. But then, make sure you also give it a chance to work. And that, even though you're going to be the one doing the heavy lifting, you don't have to be doing the heavy lifting all by yourself. There is support available. And, finally, I'd like to reiterate that while your athletes don't have to tell you everything, you and your fellow coaches are there for them, whether that's to provide practical advice or sometimes just to listen or just be with them, or as a teammate to another teammate. And so tell your players, that they're not abnormal for feeling this way, especially if they're feeling depressed, lonely, or stressed out. In fact, they're a normal person. We're all normal people caught up in an abnormal situation right now. And to help them cope, suggest that you start going through a mental skills program together as a team and direct them to the resources that you find useful.
Oh, great. Thank you, Jim. looks like, Lindsay, in the interest of time for our Q&A today, if people have submitted questions or would like to continue doing so in the next couple of minutes, that we'll answer those in a two-part blog post upcoming, as we run a little bit long. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, great. So yeah, if there's anything else that you would want to know about mental health, or you'd like to pick Jim's brain and delve into his wealth of experience, please feel free to take the next minute or two just to type in your question there, and we'll do our best to get it answered again on our blog over the next couple of weeks. And really, I'd just like to say thanks so much, Lindsay and Jim, for all of your help and insight today, and big thank you to everyone who attended. It can seem like the pandemic's never going to end, but it will. And with the mental skills and coping techniques that Jim shared today, I hope you're a little bit better equipped to safeguard your own mental health and to help the others around you. If you'd like to dive deeper into this topic of mental health, our Champions Mind course does include an entire mental health module, along with sessions on thriving under pressure, self-talk, mental toughness, and some of the other topics that we've covered before. And if you're a coach who'd like to learn more about this course for your team, please shoot us an email at the address that will be on your screen in a moment. Or if you're an individual athlete, you can unlock all the sessions by tapping GoPro in the account screen in the Champions Mind app. I'd also like to let everyone know that we'll be doing more webinars starting in the new year, and I believe our first topic will be on leadership and teamwork in January. So look out for an invite on that. Again, thanks so much for joining us. Jim, did you have any closing thoughts?
Thanks so much. There was a lot of information today. Thanks for listening. And hopefully you got one or two things that are going to really be helpful moving forward. And again, think gold, never settle for silver. And that's all about stepping into growth rather than stepping back into safety. So thanks for taking the risk of joining us today and stepping into growth with us. So we'll be rooting you on, cheering you on, and our only goal is to help you reach your goals. So thanks for giving us that opportunity today. Have a gold medal day, everyone. Thank you so much.